Hello and welcome to the tutorial for the No Beginning Chain Basket Pattern Throw. If you'll look in the description for the video, you will find the URL for the written pattern with the full instructions, and also for measurements and yarn requirements, etc., etc. The No Beginning Chain series that I have created is so that you can use really bumpy yarns like homespun, boucle, any of the really highly textured yarns. But you can use any yarn for these afghans. They're just quick and easy, and you don't have to find beginning stitches on that chain row. You don't have to make a big long chain row and find all those count off chains to start your first row. And also, throughout the blanket, you are always going to be working into spaces. You do not have to work into stitches in these No Beginning Chain blankets. And this one is called the basket pattern, which is kind of an old type stitch, but I've reworked it so that it works with the No Beginning Chain type method. And the way we're going to make our beginning, instead of a beginning chain, we're going to make a series of loops using chain stitches and triple crochets. I'm going to start with 1, 2, 3 chains, and then you're going to make a triple crochet into the first chain. So I'm going to yarn over twice and do a triple crochet into that first chain. This will be the only chain stitch you'll have to find through the whole blanket. That is it. You are done finding chain stitches. And when you complete that triple, then you have a space that you'll work into later. Hold it so that the chain stitches are on, the chains are on the bottom and the triple crochets on the top. And then chain 3, then you're going to do another triple, and this time you're going to go into that space you just created. So again, no more finding chain stitches. We're done with that. Make 3 more chains, yarn over twice, go into the last space that you made, so it's the second one so far. But you'll always just, to make this big long beginning set of loops, you will keep making 3 chains and then yarn over twice to make your triple crochet, and you'll always just go into the last space that you made. And I'm holding this so that you always have your chains at the bottom and your triples at the top. Boom. And for this particular blanket, we need just an odd number of these spaces. And I'm going to start with 7, just so that we can kind of see how it works. Have a good number of them so that you can see how a bigger blanket would look without going through the tedium of a bigger blanket. So I have 7 of the spaces, and I'm holding it with triples are at the top, the chains are at the bottom. Now, usually with crochet, you flip over and you turn at the end of each row. You will do that with this blanket, but not yet. For the very first row, you do not turn. We're going to work back across what we just made. So you're going to chain 4, and again, without turning, make a double crochet into that last space that you just made, and you'll see that that double crochet went over the triple that you made. And that's what we're going to be doing across the whole foundation row, is you're going to be making stitches in these spaces, and they're going to be over those triples. So for the beginning row, this is basically a V-stitch. This one was made by doing a 4 chains and a double crochet, since it was the first one. But you're going to make V-stitches across each of these spaces, which is just a double crochet and a chain and another double crochet. Then move to the next one and do double crochet and a chain and double crochet. And you're just going to go all the way across the row, making these V-stitches. And this, in this blanket, once you get going with it, this is one of only 2 rows that you have to learn, and you'll just repeat those 2 rows over and over again. So it's very easy to learn and goes really quick. It's something you can do and watch TV or something. You don't have to concentrate on it once you kind of learn the pattern. So I have 7 V-stitches to correspond with each of those 7 spaces that I started with. Now it's going to be like a regular blanket. You're going to actually turn the work for each row. I'm going to chain 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, and turn. So we're kind of in a traditional crochet sense that we're turning now. And I'm going to do a double crochet in that first V-stitch. There's a chain 1 space there. And the beginning of each of the rows and the end of each of the rows is going to be a V-stitch. But on this second row, that's not this V-stitch row, we're going to start the basket pattern, and it has a shell that you work into every other V-stitch. Now, the first shell, normally you're going to be doing chains between the shells, but between this V-stitch and the first shell you do not do a chain 1. And the shell is 2 double crochets and a chain, and then 2 double crochets. Then I'm going to chain 1 between shells, and I'm going to skip a V-stitch and make a shell into the V-stitch after the one I skip. So 2 double crochets and a chain and 2 double crochets. Then I'm going to chain 1 again, and you're going to go across the whole row like this with a shell and a chain and skipping V-stitches. And go across the entire row like that until you get to the last V-stitch. And since you have an odd number of V-stitches, what will happen is you will have a shell in the V-stitch before the last one. And in the last one, instead of doing a shell, you're going to do a V-stitch. And do not do a chain. There's no chain here. Just go straight from the shell to the V-stitch. And then do that V-stitch right there. Now then, again, you're going to chain 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, and turn. Now we're going to do a V-stitch row. So do a double crochet into that first V-stitch to make it's basically a chain 4 double crochet type V-stitch since it's at the beginning of the row. Don't do anything here in this space between the V-stitch and the shell, but you will make a V-stitch into the space of the shell. And again, there's no skipping or anything. You're going straight from one V-stitch to the next stitch. The V-stitches do not have chains in between them. But these 2 shells have a chain in between. Do a V-stitch into that space where that chain is between the shells. And then do a V-stitch into the next shell, into that space. And then going across the row, everywhere where you have a chain 1 space, you're going to have a chain 1 space between shells, and then in the center of the shell, do a V-stitch into each of those spaces. All the way down to this last shell, do your V-stitch in that shell. And then remember, there isn't a chain between the shell and that V-stitch at the end, and do not put a V-stitch there. And you should end up with the same number of V-stitches on this row as you did on the first row of V-stitches. So I have 7. Then you will proceed again just like this row, continue on repeating those 2 rows Make the blanket as long as you want it to be, and just remember that the shell row has V-stitches on either end without a chain space, and that the V-stitches are made in every chain one space, remembering that there isn't a chain one space between the shell and the V-stitches at the end. And if you keep those two things in mind, you should end up with the same number of stitches on every row, and everything should end up even, and you'll have a nice looking quick blanket. Thanks.